So hi guys, thanks for coming. So we'll be speaking today about holistic LTV, lifetime value, a term that's been used in the industry a little bit. I'm going to be speaking about the challenges of the lifetime value. Then Matt will be sharing some of the solutions that we have at Fyber. Just a quick question, guys. Did you hear about LTV? How many people heard about LTV in the last 12 months? Most of you. Cool. So let's see. What are the challenges that we have today in calculating a holistic LTV? Okay, let's try to understand a little bit. For us to understand what are the challenges to calculate holistic LTV, we need to first of all understand what kind of metrics were used up until now. And if we check how the industry evolved, then in the last 10 years, we've been using pretty much one of the key metrics over there, the ancient ACPM, right? ACPM to predict revenue. Is it really enough? So ACPM is good because it enables us to understand quite easily and simple revenue metrics, how much money we'll do for each and every 1,000 impressions. But it's only a proxy for revenue, because if you have high ACPM but very low fill rate, then it doesn't necessarily represent any revenue. It also speaks about demand partners. It focuses on demand partners rather than on users, so it has a big disadvantage. So we had to evolve, and then we evolved and we began speaking about ARPDAU. Now, great, average revenue per daily active user. What does it mean? Publishers are now speaking about revenues and about users, which is the two most important things and metrics for them. Now, is it enough? Listen, it focuses on ad monetization, which is a great thing. However, focusing only on ad monetization has its limitations, because then you don't take under consideration the inner purchases. Then we had to calculate the ARPU, the average revenue per pay user, and then we had to come with averages of ARPU, average revenue per user. Great. And mainly, it basically ignores segmentation. It comes and says that all the users are equal, which we know that is not the case. So it wasn't enough. We had to evolve, and the next thing that we're speaking about is the user LTV. The user LTV is a great metric because it brings two of the most important things for publishers in one KPI: is the monetization and the retention. Those are great things and very important to the publisher. The user LTV, not only that, brings us in the scope of, gives us a snapshot into understanding what is our current monetization status, and also enables us to predict and modulate future performance and revenues. Lastly, about user LTV, it's very granular. So the amount of data that we can get from it, and we'll see in a second, is really eye-opening. So let's dive deeper a little bit. So the user LTV, as we said, is a function of revenues that are defined for IAP revenues and ad revenues, and a retention. Now, the user lifetime value basically is the summary of total revenue that the user or a segment of users actually generating in the course of time being our customers. So how much money those users will generate with all the key interaction points that they have with our application. There are many interaction points, and we can actually predict them. And think about it, that if you do one change, if you would like to do one change in your application, how will that impact your overall LTV? If you, for example, would like to define that you are would like to retain users on iOS 11 in US in a specific level. By doing so, you decide that you're not going to show any ads to these users. You are able to compare those components, and by comparing those components, you will be able to understand what will happen to overall LTV. It will decrease, it will increase, it will stay the same. It gives you much more insight, such granular data, such information that wasn't able with different metrics before. So this is a great metric, as we said, and this is a balancing act. Why it's a balancing act? Because you are able in each and every stage to understand what to do in order to get to your KPIs and to your goals. But as such a powerful metric, it also has challenges to calculate. And what are the challenges that we see with LTV? So the first challenge of LTV as a metric that is based on huge amount of data sources that coming from different areas, revenues that are coming from inner purchases, from ads, retention. It's really hard to bring them all together. Now, if a publisher, a developer would like to have a clear view into LTV, they will need to put significant amount of resources into consolidating those old data points and normalizing them, which takes a lot of time. time. It's not simple. Consequently, as a result of that, developers, because it's so hard, had to make some compromises. What kind of compromises they did? They decided, listen, if we can't bring it all together, let's calculate the LTV only for in-purchase revenues. Is that accurate enough? Definitely not. So this is the first challenge. The second challenge that we have is the ad revenue accuracy. And what does it mean? We are defining the two platforms, the two mediation solutions that we have in the industry, to waterfall, the old mediation systems, the ancient ones, and the bidding ones, the new technologies, the Teslas out there, right? So what happens with the waterfalls? As we all know, it's estimated priced based on historical data, based on average CPMs per app, per country, per ad format. They're lacking lots of granular data, lots of insights. And versus bidding that are based on committed CPMs in real time and per impression. What can be greater than that? We have so much information that can be shared with us as publishers. And the problem is that we have over here is that if you are a publisher and you're using a mediation, you set your waterfall on the first network. How the network pays you? The network pays you on installs, on CPI. So if there was an install, you got the money. There was no install, there was no money. So if we have an extreme situation, scenario of 1,000 users, each and every user sees one, for example, impression, but only one user actually clicked and created an install, the mediation company has to provide an average, right? Has to provide a reporting. What kind of reporting will provide? We'll provide an average reporting. We'll take all the total amount of revenues, we'll divide it by 1,000 users, and we'll get our $1 average per user. Is it a true representation of the ROAS? Is it true representation of our LTV? Not necessarily. So we're missing over here a lot. This is basically coming and saying that bidding is giving us a clear view, simple view, very accurate view of this beautiful Mona Lisa, right? We can probably get some few guesses if we stand from behind about the Mona Lisa from the right, and probably we'll hit 1 out of 5. But again, it's a guesstimate. It's not real. It's not accurate. The good thing about it is that, listen, if you're a publisher and you have 10, 20, 30% from your revenues are coming from ads, you have to understand that you have to have accurate data in order to calculate LTV. You have to have accurate data, and accurate data is coming from bidding. But the good thing over here that we can see is that more and more inventory is becoming available programmatically, and due to that fact, more and more campaigns are running also through a user acquisition on programmatic channels, and that eventually enables publishers to get those impression data, user level data, to understand how much each and every user eventually contributes. This is the progress that we have as an industry. And the last one, the last challenge. The last challenge is the communication breakdown. So the fragmentation of the data, due to the fact that all these data points are so fragmented, so many data sources are creating team silos, or creating silos between teams. So think about, you have a user acquisition manager, you have product manager and monetization managers, right? The user acquisition manager and product manager, each and every one of them have their own LTV goals. They have their own LTV guidelines, but each and every one of them is also using different components of LTV. So while they're focusing on different components of LTV, they're neglecting other components of LTV, meaning that we're not speaking the same level. Think about the scenario that you have an application with ads and in the purchases, right? The user acquisition manager, what's his goal? Let's bring users. Let's also measure the retention, day 7 retention. Let's measure the ROI. Great. What's the monetization manager wants to do? He wants to maximize revenues for the non-paying users. So let's think what we can do. We can add additional placements. Let's go to the product manager and ask for additional placements. The product manager comes and says, are you crazy? Ads killing retention, and eventually hurts the user acquisition goals. So we have a problem over here. And most of the times those conversations are emotional conversations between the teams. They're based on feelings and not necessarily on data, because they're all fighting on the same resources, on the development resources. If you have a problem on the level 5, a churn rate problem, let's call it churning point that you have on level 5, then the product manager will come and say, okay, maybe I should change something with the application, with the content. The monetization manager will come and say, let's put maybe a rewarded video on level 4, so it will have additional gaming resources, so the user can pass this retention problem on level 5. And they eventually have to fight on the same development resources. So by having those discussions in one place, we see that we can break those silos. And how we can break those silos between the team, I will pass to Matthew Baker to tell us.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Shalom. So now we kind of understand the silos exist. What can we do to kind of break those down? So similar slide. So what we're kind of advocating is we kind of move away from the kind of vertical school of thought in terms of having a different team member that's only laser focused on kind of their targets, and more a team that has a more holistic approach that's focused on the app. So importantly, kind of we believe the concept of a growth team should exist. It's going to be comprised of the same team members, so we're still going to have a member of the UA team. They're still going to be focused and targeted on acquiring the kind of right type of users. We're still going to have an involvement from product management. They're still going to be focused on optimizing the in-game experience, and we're still going to have an input from the monetization team. So they're going to remain focused on driving increased revenues from the mediation. But what's really important is that none of these decisions kind of take place without understanding the interplay between those team members. Okay? So we believe we get there by using a holistic LTV parameter that's going to allow you to look at the performance and set goals that don't lead to a conflict of interest between those team members. Okay, so on the face of it, it's going to potentially lead to some kind of counterintuitive things at times. So we may see an action take place that on the face of it actually seems to be damaging LTV, but as long as there's a corresponding kind of uptick in a different component that gives a net LTV gain, then it's an action that we probably should consider, or an action we should probably take. Okay, so how do we kind of get to that point? How do we start collaborating effectively as this new concept of a growth team? Okay, so we think there's kind of 4 key pillars that kind of comprise this. So the first one, visibility, an integrated platform, A/B testing, and automation. So when we talk about visibility, it's about having one platform where you can kind of pull that true kind of LTV metric, get that true LTV picture in one place. So you kind of, any one of you in the team, any one of you in the room at the moment might say, hey Matt, I've got a great grasp on LTV at the moment, but I'm pulling data from 3 different sources, I'm putting that into an Excel spreadsheet, and it's not kind of not the ideal scenario to kind of manage that data. Okay. The next one being an integrated platform. So as well as having one platform where we can view that data, we think it's really important that you have a platform where you can actually take actions as well. So any of the insights that we gain from our LTV kind of understanding, we want you to take actions in the same platform. Okay. Next thing, A/B testing. So similarly to kind of visibility, I think a lot of you in the room are probably going to say, look, I do A/B testing already. And I think that's probably true. But A/B testing at the moment probably takes place in isolation. So when we're talking about A/B testing, you might be A/B testing your waterfall, trying to optimize your waterfall. You may be A/B testing your in-game experience. But what we're not doing is kind of A/B testing and looking at the impact of those tests from an LTV perspective. Okay. So it might be things like button colors, when to show an in-app purchase offer, as well as things like ad frequency or waterfall, but looking at that really with a lens of LTV rather than those silos that we discussed before. And then the last one is automation. So again, so we could do automation really means to us kind of doing things at scale. So humans can probably optimize for maybe 5 changes. Some of your team can look at 10 different cohorts. Again, someone can probably manage about 20 optimizations and get a good grasp on kind of what's going on. But that's probably about the limit. So to kind of gain kind of insights at scale, we really need to look at kind of automation. And what we hope there is the outcome of that is going to be like a highly tailored user experience and a highly kind of fine-tuned kind of LTV kind of metric. Okay, so that's amazing, but how do we take that concept, how do we take it from a concept to reality? So Fyber has an exclusive partnership with a company called Game of Wales. We've been working with them for probably about 9 months now. It's fully kind of integrated into the platform. But when we look at kind of how the synergy between those companies works and how we can kind of move towards an LTV, Basically, so the relationship means that we can kind of provide all of those monetization tools in one place. So we look at kind of Fyber Fairbid. Fairbid is our mediation product, but that's fundamentally built on bidding. So kind of when Shalom has talked about kind of estimated CPMs versus true CPMs, bidding allows us to get an actual CPM, so a committed CPM value for each impression that's delivered. So we're not looking at a kind of waterfall estimated CPM, we're looking at a committed CPM. Okay. So Game of Whales can then take that data and marry that data, so with the impression level data, they can marry that with in-app purchase data that we have. Okay. It could also bring to the table kind of machine learning algorithms, so we can continuously segment users. It's no longer kind of requiring a human to kind of go and manage all of those segmentations. We can create multiple segments at any one time and optimize towards those segments. And then finally, it has a kind of a full comprehensive suite of A/B testing tools. So that means we can optimize for any aspect of the game, whether that's user flow, whether it's monetization, any of those components we can kind of look at the kind of picture with the lens of LTV. Cool. So what does it actually look like? So in reality, kind of what does the platform look like? So you'll see here for the first time in one dashboard we've got ads revenue and we've got IAP revenue kind of available in one place. Okay, so we can start to, again, just to kind of really hammer this point home. So when we're talking about kind of in-app, so the ads revenue we're talking about here, we're talking about committed bids. So this is coming from an auction model. So those bids are committed and we have an accurate kind of impression level data, which means it's kind of a lot more accurate than kind of anything we see from a waterfall. So we can start to identify things like who the whales are, both from an in-app purchase perspective. So who are the biggest spenders in the app? We can also understand from an ads perspective as well, so who our biggest ads whales are. And for the first time, we can start to look at actually who the combination of kind of full, who the big revenue drivers are from the combined in-app purchase and ads revenue perspective. So that kind of leads us to some interesting things. We can start to kind of feed those insights into the user acquisition team. So you've all probably kind of done some lookalike targeting with your in-app purchase whales, but maybe you haven't done that with your ads whales. So it kind of opens up a kind of a new kind of path to explore from an in-app purchase perspective. So while we're on the screen, you'll notice kind of we've got names against the kind of the particular users. But I just want to call out kind of at this point, any of the data in the platform is non kind of PII, so these are kind of randomly assigned names. And I'm sure we're going to get this question later on, but any of the data in the Game of Whales platform is kind of siloed off for you guys. So we don't share that across different publishers. Those learnings and that data is your data, so we don't kind of pass that across. Cool. So it takes us to kind of data-driven decisioning. So Game of Whales kind of is able to run A/B tests at scale. So we can look at things like segmenting users based upon their playing habits. So things like session length, frequency, playing time. We can kind of run multiple optimizations to each of those points. Okay, so that means that we can do things like ad decisioning. So Fyber SDK is able to consult with the Game of Whales SDK and say, look, is it appropriate to serve an ad to this user, like yes or no? So we can actually make decisions on kind of whether to actually show ads to users rather than having a default show ads to kind of all users. So that you can imagine that might lead to some potential use cases. So we might have, for example, it might lead to in-app purchase whales not being shown ads at all. For a more moderate user, a more moderate purchaser, we might still show ads, but kind of less ads than we would do to someone that doesn't interact with in-app purchase at all. And what's important is that very, very early on, we can start to build a profile of users that aren't going to go into that in-app purchase funnel. So we can recognize, okay, this user is never going to convert. We kind of see this type of user over and over again. We know this user is not going to convert via in-app purchase. So early on, we can make a decision to kind of show more ads to that user, or maybe show a different type of ad to that user. Okay. So we can also take actions such as looking at kind of in-app purchase offers that adjust by time and price to increase conversions, to look at kind of re-engaging churn users, or help identify users that are about to churn, maybe serve them an offer that is going to help them get past a particular level in the game. Okay, so it's all about kind of that full LTV piece, about looking at churn, monetization, and kind of helping you to kind of paint that full picture. So we know, first of all, we know inherently it's kind of difficult to trust an AI. So having an AI in the background, kind of making all these decisions, working with thousands of different segments, that's kind of an inherently hard thing to do. So to alleviate these concerns, there's always a control group that is run by Game of Wales. So you can always measure the performance of those changes that are taking place against the control group and see that the impact of those changes is driving kind of increased growth. And Game of Wales also looks back over a 4-week period. So Wednesday over Wednesday, for example, over a 4-week period, we're looking back to show that there's incremental growth over that time frame. Cool, and so bringing it all together, so just to kind of recap on those points that we've mentioned. So it's important to kind of align teams around common goals and practices, so kind of removing those silos of kind of verticality. So where LTV becomes the common metric that all teams align behind, and it represents the kind of value of the team rather than the individual. It's important to kind of have resource allocation with data and testing. So no longer battling for those resources and kind of priority amongst the team. So you have everyone working towards that common goal and using data decision metrics. And then ultimately kind of creating a tailored and dynamic user experience. A bit behind on the clicks here. Yeah. So all of this is kind of fantastic, but what it ultimately leads to is a tailored experience for every single user. So again, if I'm an in-app purchase whale, I probably don't expect to see kind of thousands of ads in the app. But if I'm someone that's not kind of purchasing, then I might expect to see more ads, and that user is more likely to churn. So we create an experience which is relevant to the particular user. Okay. And the last one is optimizing in individual KPIs, so to kind of maintain overall growth. So any changes that we make, such as increasing kind of ad load, strike the right balance with those other metrics, such as user retention, and ensuring that kind of we have an overall LTV growth. Cool. I think, yeah, so that's it. If we've got any questions, if you want to open up at all, I don't know if we have time. Or
questions for Matt, the guys.
Where does the segmentation happen, and how quickly can that be actioned?
So where does the segmentation happen and where can it be actioned? So the segmentation takes place within the Game of Wales platform. So I think in terms of kind of how frequently the segmentation happens from an automated standpoint, we'd probably need to kind of speak to Deron, who's kind of around somewhere in the room. So maybe we can kind of come to the Fyber booth afterwards and give you a bit more detail on that specifically. But yeah, the segmentations all happen within the Game of Wales platform, which is kind of baked into the Fyber platform.
But of course, very definable. You can adjust it to different metrics, different granularity options, and it's very flexible.
So there's a distinction. So there's automations that can take place automatically via Game of Wales, and then there's segmentations which you can build into the platform as well. So if you want to run your own A/B tests, you can kind of do that and build those tests as you like in the platform. Or there's an element of control you can give over to Game of Wales, looking at kind of things like ad frequency and that impact. So you can kind of have it set and forget, or you can kind of add in your own A/B testing as well. So yeah.
Other questions? Actually, while you're thinking of a question, I got to tell you, the holistic A/B testing concept is really strong. While I was at Amazon, we would test everything when we did A/B testing. If we changed where a buy button was or what a buy button looked like, we didn't just test the effect on sales, we tested the unintended consequences of what it did to everything else on the page. Because if you change focus for one item, sure, you can affect the impact of that one desired item, but when you change the impact of that item, what are you taking attention away from? And that impacts everything that you've done. So kudos on the holistic A/B testing. I'm now a huge fan.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Cool.
Other questions? No other questions? Fyber, guys, thank you very much for being gold sponsors. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And thank you for speaking.
Thank you.